Okay, so introduction to print media I had already started. So now I will first newspaper. Okay, we will try and understand about what is first newspaper. Right, first newspaper in the world. We will little bit try to understand about the history of the print media. The history. We will see how the newspaper originated, emerged in this world. Clear? So the first question is asking which was the first newspaper published in the world. Okay, which was the first newspaper published in the world? First newspaper, right? It is very difficult to point out a single newspaper as the first one. Okay, we cannot say the single newspaper as the first one. If we ask the question which was the first newspaper, so here it is saying during the Mauryan period, the king used to circulate the news to the people as proclamation. Okay, so here it is saying that during the Mauryan period, how the news was circulating with the help of proclamation. Proclaim means announcement. Okay, so during Mauryan period, this announcement the news was spread, and in ancient time Rome acted diurna or government announcement. Okay, were published regularly. So the same government announcement in ancient Rome, they were inscribed in metal and stone. So this government announcement is inscribed in what? Metal and stone. They are doing announcement in metal and stone. This is the king announcement, and this can be considered as the earliest form of newspaper. Okay, so the during modern period, and which means nearby 700 before Common Era, and in China, also the government produced such news sheets called Tipao. Okay, so in China also the such sheets are called Tipao. So in the planet, the first newspaper was is not in paper. It was on the metal and the stone in Rome and modern period. Clear? And in China, the first sheets and the sheets of newspaper they are printing is called Tipao. Many researchers consider many researcher there are many researchers are there in the planet. Okay, they consider the Peking Gazette. Okay, many research consider the Peking Gazette published from China as the first newspaper. There was a many researchers are considering the first newspaper was a Peking Gazette. It is published from China, and it was started in 618. In the initial stages, this newspaper was handwritten. Okay, it was started in 618 year. So in the initial time, which means the beginning of the newspaper was handwritten and distributed to the reader. Later, it was printed and circulated. The Peking Gazette continued its publication to the beginning of 20th century. Okay, so this Peking Gazette was the first newspaper according to the researcher in China. On the beginning time, it was this Peking Gazette was written by hand, but after a period of time, it was imprinted. Okay, and it was famous till 20th century, which means 1900. Clear? The newsletter circulated by rulers were the first format of newspaper. So newsletter which is circulated by the kings. Okay, circulated by the rulers. They were the first newspaper. In India, the East India Company circulated such newsletter. In India, the East India Company, which is made by the Britisher, and that was circulated by such newsletter. Clear? According according to the World Association of Newspaper. Okay, according to the World Association of Newspaper. Okay, according to the World Association of Newspaper, The first newspaper in the modern sense was published by Johann Carolus. Okay, so the World Association, according to this organization, they are saying the first newspaper in a modern sense was published in 1605. John Carolus. The name of the paper is bit long. Is bit long. The name of the paper is little bit long. The relation Eller Furman and Vernon historian. Okay, this is the newspaper. In 1600, another newspaper was started from Germany called File. From Germany also it is started. Yet another newspaper in the modern concept was published from Venice called the Gazette. So these were the first newspaper in the world according to the modern period. Because before at that time in the ancient time, medieval period, then this time in the modern period, the 1605, the newspaper was started in Europe side and in India also. Okay. But many such earlier newspaper could not survive for long. But this earlier newspaper wouldn't survive long. The rulers were not happy with this publication as some of them started criticizing their rule. So this earlier newspaper, was not survive long because the king of the kingdom doesn't like the such kind of publication because they are impacting on the ruler. So many people were forced to close down. So many newspapers were forced to close down because of the king. In USA, a newspaper, the public occurrence lasted only for a day. So in United States of America, there was a public occurrence. This newspaper was started, and in one day only it was vanished. It was stopped. Similarly was the fate of daily paper started by James in UK. So there are some newspaper because of the king people, they have stopped the paper for one day only. These two, daily paper and public occurrence. Newspaper underwent a lot of changes in their form, content after that in England. Okay, newspaper has gone through many changes in their form, in their content. Newspaper was before, like today newspaper if you read, it is very changeable. But if you see the past, it was very different. So it was changed totally. The weekly news was launched in 1622. Okay, the weekly news was launched in 1622. Okay, and the first newspaper of modern concept was published in Oxford 1665. Okay, the weekly news was launched 1622, then 1655. After 30 years, the modern concept of newspaper was published by Oxford. It was the Oxford Gazette. The first newspaper published from London was Daily Gazette. The first newspaper. So here the information is giving about the first newspaper. It was edited by the E. Mallet in 1784. Johns Walter launched Daily Universal Register from London, which was adopted a new name, the Times. Okay, so these are the newspaper where the first newspaper in the world. Like why we are studying about the printed media, so definitely we will look about the past, the history of the newspaper, how it started. So in short, you can keep in mind that before, in the ancient time, people didn't use the paper because at that time no invention. So during this period, that period, okay, so this were the history. And if I talk about the this in the USA, sorry, do you know which is the largest circulated newspaper in the world? So here the question is asking, which is the largest circulation of a newspaper in the world? In India, if I talk about the Hindu, but in the world, in which country is it published? The largest circulated newspaper is the Yomiuri Shimbun, published from Japan, and it has circulation of copies per day. The second and third largest circulated dailies in the world are also published from Japan. Okay, so Japanese people are the very best in the printed newspaper because their circulation throughout the world. Okay, so we have understood a little bit history about the newspaper. Now let's try and understand about the newspaper printing in India. Clear? The newspaper printing in India. How the newspaper printing in India started? We need to learn now this. Okay. I think so. It will take time for me. So I'm going to stop here now. We have done this much.